One of the companies that I write for is Sovereign Man. One of the articles I write is a Sunday piece that only goes to paid subscribers, but this week I got permission to share it with all of you as well. So without further ado, I'll be talking about how students can now pay tuition with coconuts at a university in Bali. Bali's economy is heavily dependent on tourism, which obviously has not been doing so hot this year due to COVID-19. With many students facing hardships to pay tuition, one university in Bali is now accepting coconuts, moringa leaves, and gotu kola leaves instead of cash. The coconuts are then processed into coconut oil by the college, the Venus One Tourism Academy, which is a college that specializes in teaching hospitality services. The coconut oil, along with moringa and gotu kola, are then made into herbal soaps. And at that point, students have the opportunity to practice their entrepreneurship skills and sell the soap to raise money for the university and themselves. This might sound like a publicity gimmick, but the school has actually been accepting coconuts for tuition since March, and only recently has the media picked up on the story. And why not accept coconuts as tuition? These items actually have real value and use. Plus, students take part in a real-world economics lesson, harvesting raw materials, processing them into a more valuable product, and then marketing and selling that product. Bali has hit on some tough economic times, and this is one way to keep creating value regardless. In this case, Bali is suffering from a lack of foreign dollars injected into the economy, as usual. In the West, the actual stability and value of the dollar, as well as other currencies, is at risk of inflation due to the massive amounts of money printing. There's nothing of real value backing up those dollars being printed, such as gold or increased economic output. But don't take this as an apocalyptic prediction. The world is not going to end, even if the dollar does. But right now, every scenario is on the table, so it makes sense to think through worst-case scenarios. At Sovereign Man, we often discuss the value of keeping some gold or silver on hand to be used as money in an emergency. After all, precious metals have at least a 5,000-year history of being considered valuable. And of course, there are plenty of other ways to store value as well, such as art, antique weapons, productive land, just to name a few. But these are not always easily transported, traded, or immediately useful. So let's discuss a few other ways to create money in an emergency worst-case scenario. Coconuts alone are not a great medium of exchange. They're bulky, perishable, and not everybody likes to eat them. Soap, on the other hand, is universally valuable, relatively compact, and it doesn't go bad. And if it was scarce, the value would increase accordingly. That's just basic supply and demand economics. And the same thing applies to dried beans or grain, for instance. They store well and can be eaten, but in typical times they are not very hard to come by. However, if supply chains suffered and food became scarce, their value would increase. One added value of dried beans is that they can be planted to create more beans. You can create your own money, just like the Federal Reserve. Grain, too, has another use. Just like coconuts, it can be processed into another product with more value. In this case, whiskey, or basically any alcohol. That could be used for sanitation purposes or fuel. It's relatively compact, doesn't go bad. It can even preserve foods that would go bad on their own and extract the medicinal properties of certain plants. Plus, drinkable alcohol is one of those few products that remains in demand no matter what is going on in the world. So alcohol is a better money than grain. But a money printer is even more valuable than a stash of money. If you own a whiskey still, you could serve as a clearinghouse for other people's stored grain, or basically anything else that could be fermented into mash. Just like when the college makes the coconuts collected by the students into soap, the processor controls the final, most valuable product. By the way, real soap is made from a chemical reaction between fat and lye. Almost any fat will do. It used to be common to use animal fat. Who's seen the movie Fight Club? Lye is a little harder to come by, but it can be produced by running water through wood ash. But make sure you know what you're doing and use extreme caution, as lye is extremely corrosive and will burn your skin. Here are a few more ideas for manufacturing valuable money in an emergency scenario. A dehydrator or smokehouse for preserving meats. Beef jerky is calorie dense and stores well, unlike frozen meat, which is heavy and depends on constant electricity for the freezer. Nut trees. Nuts are calorie dense, full of protein, easily stored and transported, and once established, certain nut trees require relatively little regular care. Medicinal herbs. Herbs are easily dried and stored and could really come in handy if traditional medicine is hard to come by. And this isn't the stuff of folk tales or witch doctors. Most common drugs were derived from compounds found in plants. Willow bark is a great example. It contains salicin, which led to the discovery of aspirin. The use of willow bark as medicine dates back at least 3,500 years to the first known civilization, ancient Sumer. The Sumerians also used barley and silver as money. It's not a bad idea to familiarize yourself with the wild natural herbs that grow around where you live and their uses. After all, useful skills and knowledge can continuously produce real-world, tangible wealth. And keep in mind that I'm not suggesting that society necessarily ever will deteriorate enough so that you have to use soap and whiskey as a currency. But at Sovereign Man, we're all about having a solid plan B, and we would be remiss not to consider the worst case scenarios. So I hope you found that little discussion useful, guys. It's really just about having a backup plan for anything that could go wrong. 2020 has given us a preview of plenty of those scenarios, so it always makes sense to consider how you would continue producing value, creating the things that you need, and trading for the things that you need in your life in a worst case scenario. I'm Joe Jarvis. Thanks for watching. Please come back and see me again soon.